Hey, and a warm welcome to Awaken Your Potential, the podcast designed to inspire self-improvement and unlock the greatness within you. I'm your host, Mason Lovegrove. In this podcast, I'll be talking about everything from strange ideas and deep philosophies to wild experiences, getting in shape, finding your zen, and a whole lot more. Together, we can explore some of my life experiences so far, and I hope you can take something away from my learnings and maybe apply them to your everyday. In this episode, I'll be discussing the benefits of video games and how they can help us improve our mental health. I'll also be interviewing a VR game developer from England. But before that, I'm going to tell you how video games have helped me become better. So, get ready to feel awakened. My first ever game that I played was Spyro Year of the Dragon. It's like a platform game where you play as this purple dragon. While playing this, I was running, flying, collecting gems and dragon eggs. It kind of allowed me to experience this magical and wonderful world in a very personal way because you're in control. Whereas this was like feel more connected to the character you play as. Just like the stress of being a teenager, exams, trying to get your education, trying to keep your social status up, your first time you get into relationships, whether it's a romantic relationship or even with your friends, you know, it's a hard time for teenagers. And the way that I would disconnect was through video games. And I feel like they helped me a lot in the sense that I could just turn on my PlayStation and just disappear into this interesting world and just play as somebody else, and kind of like you're living in this different world, and all the problems you have, all the stress, the worries, it all goes away. And you realize that a lot of bad things happen in games. It's kind of a reminder of saying, you know what, like life sometimes isn't fair. It's just life. It is what it is. Like good things can happen and bad things can happen. And playing video games, when something bad happens to the main character, you're rooting for them. You're kind of saying to them, I want you to keep fighting, keep moving forward. I want you to be strong. And that's something that we want somebody to tell us. So when you don't have somebody telling you that, but you're telling this to a video game character, it can kind of bounce back and resonate with you. And I find that very powerful. The reason I got into parkour was thanks to video games. You know, I was playing games like Prince of Persia, Crash Bandicoot, and Assassin's Creed, and the majority of video games, I lived in a country house. So I built like these tracks in my garden of put pallets and tires and bars and stuff, and I would run and I would jump and I'd pretend I was in a video game. One of my all-time favorite video games is Red Dead Redemption. For you guys who don't know this, it's a game created by Rockstar, and you basically plays as a protagonist, and you're an outlaw in a world that doesn't want you anymore. And the thing that I have to say about it is it's an incredible journey. It has this immersive world, gameplay that is just so realistic, and it has a story that constantly tugs at your heartstrings. It was a wonderful experience to just be able to disconnect from the real world, even doing simple things like wandering around, listening to the rivers and the birds and the animals, and riding on horseback up the mountains and through streams and things like that. It was great, and you realize how much people suffered when you play this game, and it's a great way for us to learn how other people also have these issues and they have these troubles that they have to face. And it's a great way for us to then look at our life and be like, wow, I'm going through a hard time, but it's normal. Because I feel like something we don't talk about in society, that it's okay to not be okay. It's not about saying to somebody, you know, it's okay to be sad. It's about telling someone, like, as a human emotion, it's normal to be upset. It's normal to feel unmotivated. It happens to the most of us, and we need to find a way to get through this. And I feel like video games portray this in an incredible way, and we can relieve our stress through video games. We can relieve our worries and problems in these worlds. And I find that this is really important, and I'm 24 now. I've been playing video games my whole life, and it is one of the stages of my life. Like, I'm excited, you know, when I have a bad day, apart from going to the gym or going for a nice walk, sometimes it's like, you know what, I want to disconnect and I want to play, and I find that quite precious. Thank you for joining me here at Awaken Your Potential. Could you introduce yourself for the listeners, please?
Yeah, sure. I'm Rob Farthing. I'm a lead Unity developer at EPM Agency, and I work on all kinds of like real-time 3D apps. Do all the stuff in them, like programming, modeling, animating, all the good stuff.
Could you tell us what got you into video games and how they affected you in your everyday life?
So I don't remember when I first played video games, but I remember when my mum just bought me a PS1 for like Christmas one year, and the first game I had was Crash Bandicoot. So I didn't really know a lot about games then, but I think it was just I got immediately hooked on it because there were lots of things to collect in the levels. There was lots of things to do, and it just kept me really occupied as a kid. So I kind of went from there and built gaming PCs with my dad as I grew up. But most of the time it was just like a form of escapism or something I would often be doing if my dad or my mum sat watching me. So it was kind of like a family thing when I was playing. And I've got a younger sister, so she kind of got into gaming too. But we'd always just sit and play games together like every summer, like just for fun.
Yeah, I completely understand what you mean. Like, for me as well, when I was younger, playing, video games with my dad and my sisters was a great way for our family to kind of bond. So it's a great way to bring friends and family together. So moving on from, playing video games with our family, how did you end up getting into, VR development, and what actually inspired you to create a meditation app using VR?
So I'd never actually initially owned a VR headset when I started working on stuff for VR. It was just that I went to Portsmouth University and studied computer games tech, so I wanted to make games. I was like, I'm going to be a game developer. And then at some point during then, the VR headsets came out, like the first Oculus Rift and HTC Vive. So that launch year was insane. And the university were like, you guys should use it. They're bringing in like clients like the Navy, like different companies that wanted to use VR for like architecture. So they were asking us, like the game students, can you use VR and can you use it for these industries? So I kind of swerved away from making games and working on games to like working in the VR industry for that reason. But moving on to the VR meditation, that was quite an interesting story because I was basically looking to change jobs. I'd already worked at a digital agency making apps for like different clients, and I wanted to like have a change. So I was looking at jobs and I saw a job listing from a company called Myam Health in Bournemouth, and they do like digital healthcare apps for people. Like they provide them through the NHS to help people with asthma, COPD, heart conditions, all kinds of things like that. So they're just trying to help people, but they had a position with Bournemouth University as like a guest researcher to work with them and like pair their work with the university's research and make an app for their customers. So I pitched to them like a VR meditation app. This kind of came from me playing horror games in VR at the time. Like I was playing Resident Evil 7 specifically, and the game was horrifying. It was like, it was so scary, but as I got into the game more, I realized I was getting used to it, and I learned that was something called habituation, which I found out about later. But I basically pitched to them in the interview, we should make an app that really scares people so they can get over like phobias, or it can help them relax more in the real world.
Yeah, I mean, I'm somebody who, when I'm scared of something, I have to kind of put myself through that experience again and again if necessary until I become kind of like immune to it, because you kind of know it's not as bad as your mind wants you to think it is. So I feel like that's quite powerful and inspiring to kind of work through those issues that you have and, come out of it on top. But, going back to, this VR app, it sounds quite challenging. So I was wondering, how did the collaboration with psychologists and researchers come about on this project?
So we were making an app for a practice called mindfulness, which is basically a form of meditation. And we needed to get psychologist input because this app was going to go out with the NHS. It needed to have like research input. It needed to have proof that it would work. So the initial facilitation was me sitting down with them, with like the main lecturers at Bournemouth University for their games department, and just saying, how would you like practice mindfulness and how can we adapt that to a digital format? So often I would just be making test builds. Like the VR app was basically you in a forest practicing different things like closing your eyes, focusing on your body, moving your arms around in mindful ways. So I would just bring it back to them and we test it out with the psychologist.
That sounds like something I'd love to try. I mean, I always try to meditate every day, but sometimes it can be difficult, especially when you can't meditate outside. I'm somebody who likes to meditate in nature, so in the forest or by a river. So I feel like when I can't do that because of my work or because of the weather, I feel like being able to just sit in your living room and put on a VR headset and just kind of meditate in a forest of your choice is a great way to help people that can't focus when they're trying to meditate. So when people are trying this app, what is the user experience like for them?
When I was making this app, the target audience was going to be people that haven't used VR before. So we had to like figure out how to make it easy to navigate. Things that weren't available at the time are available now, like hand tracking or like using eyes to track. So we basically made a menu where you would look at a board in front of you and there'd be a few options on it, or you could use your hands to point at them. So I kind of built it with that in mind. I mean, I don't know what kind of experience you have with VR yourself, but I'd be interested to hear about that.
So I don't have too much experience, to be fair. I have tried at a friend's house. And to be fair, it was a lot more realistic than I initially thought. And it's just incredible how technology has evolved so much. I started gaming on, the PS1, where I also thought those graphics incredible and realistic. And now we're like on the PlayStation 5. And now that they can actually implement those graphics as well into a VR experience, it's quite unique. Like I played Resident Evil on the VR, and that was so realistic, scary, but at the same time really realistic.
Yeah, so like from that example, you'd probably be our target audience for the app, like someone that doesn't use VR on a daily basis. So just tapping into what you said about realism, we had to make the forest look really realistic so people would forget they're in VR, they put a headset on, and then getting them past that point, they could really relax on meditation. So a lot of the practices would require you to like close your eyes and move your arms so that the headset was still tracking the user's hands or their controllers, but you just kind of forget you're in VR was the whole point of it, really.
Yeah, I mean, like when you are immersed so much in a video game, it's a great way, like like we mentioned before, about being able to disconnect from everything else. So I feel like with VR, it's that one step further, and it's quite interesting how you can completely get immersed in these virtual worlds to disconnect even further. So like rather than just meditating at home, how can VR enhance this process?
So one of the main things we looked at was if you were to go outside and practice mindfulness, you'd quite often leave your house, you'd be in the same place, you'd go around the neighborhood. What I wanted to do was take people away from that, so transport you to somewhere else. So you could pick a place. You could be in a shrine, you could be in Asia, you could be in Europe, you could be in America, wherever you feel most relaxed. But as well as that, it being virtual with a headset on would allow you to escape in your own home. So if, for example, you lived in a block of flats, you don't want to leave every day, you might just want to be practicing mindfulness in your own room. You can just put the headset on and block everything else out effectively. You could just be sat down, or you might be bedridden. And that was also like something I found at the time. It's a lot of companies were just taking VR headsets to people in hospitals and just allowing them to escape by just putting it on and then just playing videos of like scenic locations. So basically avoided making a roller coaster and just tried to make people as comfortable as possible, even if they weren't aware of how the technology worked. So we had to test it internally using like the staff at MyM Health and at Bournemouth University who are already part of the project, including the psychologists. So I had to take it to like the psychology department at Bournemouth Uni and sit down with them, get their opinions on it. But the findings we had were that at the time, the NHS was like prioritizing a concept called gamification. So it was rewarding people for having better health, but it kind of felt to me like you were just adding rewards to the game to encourage people to play it, which is kind of why I got into playing games in the first place, because there were collectibles, you get a high score, there are reasons to come back and do it. So we built that into the game, you get a score for each practice you did, and sometimes there'd be some random elements that would make it more challenging when you come back, and I kind of built it out from there, and overall everyone sort of agreed that was a good route to go with it, and that's what I've seen a lot of digital healthcare prioritizing lately.
I also love the challenges of gaming, like when you find a game that you really like and you want to achieve the platinum trophy, and you want to kind of do everything the game has to offer, and you put time and effort into it, and it's overall quite entertaining, and it's a great way to keep your mind busy, and it's a great way, like you mentioned, about that replayability value and bringing you back for more. It's also really good for people, in my opinion, that struggle with mental health, being able to focus on these challenges in a virtual world that they can then learn from and implement them into their everyday life. But what about you? Would you recommend, like from a personal point of view, video games for people that are struggling with their mental health?
I think I'd recommend certain video games to people just for helping them with their mental well-being, because, for example, I would play different games on different days depending on how I'm feeling. So I might have a bad day at work and I might not want to go play a competitive shooting game because that might just get me more annoyed and add to the mood that I already had. Or some days, like, I might just have had a really relaxing day and I want to like go and like play something that's going to take up a lot of my time because I'm already in a relaxed mood. I just want to focus on a game, like, for example, like an open world game or something like God of War, for example. I could sit down and spend like 5 hours of an evening.
Yes, I absolutely love God of War. It's actually my favorite game. Just being able to explore like this Norse mythology with Kratos and Greek mythology, it's amazing. Anyway, Rob, thank you so much for sharing your insights and passion for video games with us today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the podcast.
Yeah, it's been an honor, and I think it's sort of helped me like look back at things I've worked on in the past. It reminds me of something that I'm really passionate about. That's why I kind of got into VR in the first place. So thanks for having me.
In today's episode, we discuss the ability to escape the real world through the power of video games, whether it's through jumping bandicoots, flying dragons, outlaws, or even immersive worlds in VR. As we wind down this episode, I just want to say thanks for tuning in, and remember, you have potential, and it's your mission to awaken it. Until next time, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep awakening that incredible potential within you. Thank you for listening.